Hi there, landlords. This is Nicole, your landlord advocate. So today I want to talk to you about a case study where I helped a landlord win his case around wrongful eviction, and the tenant was suing him for $30,000. So the case was very, very complicated. And when the landlord approached me, the landlord was very, very concerned about being sued for $30,000. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're being sued by a tenant, for example, for 20, 25, $30,000, it's a lot of money that's on the line. So when this landlord consulted with me, the landlord wanted to get a strategy. And the landlord wanted to get a strategy to see what is his best leverage or what would be a path for a possible win. So although I never guarantee a win, I always help the landlord formulate a strategy in order for them to have the highest leverage possible. Now, the landlord also wanted to consult with his lawyer, which is fine. So if you want to consult with a lawyer, that's fine. If you also want to add in myself as a landlord advocate, that's also fine as well. So we were basically on the landlord's team and helping him really come up with a very, very powerful strategy. What was going on for this landlord was they were going to be focused on a strategy around the way that the notice was served. And as I analyzed and looked into this whole strategy around how the notice was served, basically, when the notice was served, it could have been argued that the tenant did not receive the notice. The fact that the tenant is actually starting a dispute against the landlord means that the tenant would have gotten the notice from somewhere. And so trying to argue that the tenant did not receive the notice was not a very, very strong argument. So we needed to come up with an even stronger argument instead of just being focused on service. And again, focused on service or focusing on service is not necessarily a very, very strong argument with the RTB. So if the RTB and the arbitrators see that the tenant is filing a dispute and the tenant has the eviction notice and or a copy of the eviction notice, they're going to see that there's some sort of legitimacy that's around that. And so this is why we really needed to look at this case more in depth to see how the landlord was going to be navigating the win. So as we analyzed the case, we began to realize that there was an extenuating circumstance that was also attached to the landlord's process. And so we needed to leverage that part of the act. So going in the direction of the way that the notice was served in terms of, okay, the tenant was served a notice via social media and so on, wasn't really going to cut it with regards to this case. So we needed to use the extenuating circumstances, as that is also a part of the act, in that when a landlord cannot fulfill the stated purpose of them having served the landlord use notice, and if there is an extenuated circumstance, there's a possibility that the director can excuse the landlord. And so as I analyzed and kind of like went into the different layers with this case, I began to see that there is a very, very specific tool that they can use in order to help them win. And I began to offer the landlord this path. And I talk about the path to a possible win. I began to offer the landlord this path to a possible win. And I asked the landlord, I think it's a really good idea for you to talk to your lawyers and let them know that I think this is a strategy that you need to prepare for. So what we had to do was we had to prepare an additional evidence piece that was going to be pointing to that extenuating circumstance, as well as bring the witness that was also going to help to give really, really big leverage to this case. So that's exactly what we did. So we prepared the strategy around the extenuating circumstance, as well as brought in, I call this the star witness, brought in the main witness that was connected to this extenuating circumstance, and just trying to protect my client's privacy. So I'm not going to go into the details and sort of like the final layers. I'm just giving you a broad idea around how we got the win. So during the hearing, when there is an argument that this specific extenuating circumstance preventing the landlord's family member from occupying the unit, and then we had this in terms of a backup with other evidence pieces. For example, we had, an affidavit, and we had the doctor's info that was connected to this. So when we have these pieces of evidence, we're bringing and we're talking about during the hearing, and they brought and they were talking about during the hearing, of course, the arbitrator has to weigh whether or not this is reasonable that the landlord did not fulfill the stated purpose and or the intent. Now, the reason why this was really complicated was because when the landlord faced the extenuating circumstance and the family member was not able to occupy the unit, the landlord then listed the unit. And relisting the unit after you serve a landlord use notice is by far one of the biggest mistakes that landlords make because they don't realize tenants are tracking them and following them around on social media. So this tenant was following the landlord around on social media. The tenant did not know about the extenuating circumstance. All the tenant saw was that the landlord listed the property or relisted the property for a significant amount more than this tenant was paying. And it was really for the tenant, this I got you, right? This got you moment. And so when there's such solid evidence on the tenant side with the tenant screen shot in the info and providing this info, as well as providing the notice, as well as providing whatever other information, then of course, trying to mount your evidence against that is extremely difficult. But we were able to successfully bring in multiple different pieces of evidence, as well as combining a very, very powerful strategy that brought everything together to help the landlord have a win. And so the tenant lost the case. The tenant was not rewarded $30,000. The landlord was able to save himself from having to pay the tenant $30,000. When it comes to the landlord use notice, you always have to have it in the back of your mind that there is a possibility that you can face a dispute. When it comes to the way tenants are in the marketplace, they're always trying to find reasons to go after the landlord. And so therefore, you have to be able to be very, very, very prepared. So far, I'm excited because this now adds to a combined total of close to $200,000 that I've been able to save landlords with regards to this one specific eviction. Landlord use eviction is like one of the number one evictions. And by far, there is a lot of money on the line. So really, really excited for the landlord, putting together a very, very strong case, using the part of the act, which is the extenuating circumstances, and then laying out so many different pieces of strategy around that really was what helped the landlord nail this case. If you have any quick questions about your tenancy, feel free to get a hold of me, Nicole at lconsultinggroup.ca. I'd be happy to have a quick chat with you. So shoot me an email.